If 31 Days of Comics were a person I could talk to, 31 Days of Comics is not a person. 31 Days of Comics is the prompt-based comics recommendation game that we're playing on this channel. Previous episodes in the playlist linked below and above. But if I could talk to 31 Days as a person, I would say thank you and well played. Because Day 11's prompt is an old comic you love. A wonderfully easygoing prompt, especially compared to Day 10's the most beautiful scene in any comic. No definite article today, pick one of many. No superlative or judgment here, simply the uncontroversial subjectivity of something you love. And if I want to continue translating this as a reaction to my reaction last time, it's an old comic. So the natural question that we would start with, what makes an old comic, could easily be answered with, well, certainly anything you ever read when you were young. But I'm not going to take the easy way out thrown to a man of my advanced years by simply picking something from my childhood. There are plenty of other prompts that we've seen before and are coming up, I think, that will allow us to get into nostalgia in a big way. Rather, I really want to lean into the old comic part of this as far as I can. But before I do that, here's my first question to all of you. What makes an old comic for you? Is it a number of years? Is 10 years old an old comic? 20 years old? 30 years old? Or would you take a much more historical approach? Since the comics medium, at least the way we know it, is a lot younger than film or theater, would we take a proportionate sectioned off idea? Something like the golden or silver ages? Or would it be something else altogether? The way that I'm going to look at it, a viewpoint afforded to me by my seniority, is that I'm going to identify an old comic as something that was published before I was born. As soon as I decided that, I wanted to push it a little bit more. So then I adjusted old to being something that was published at least a decade before I was born. Of course, just because it's old doesn't mean you read it a long time ago. The thing I really like about this prompt is that an old comic you love could be a comic that you have loved for a long time, an old love, or it could be a recent love and a discovery of something that has existed for a long time. This allows for a wonderfully open and flexible approach to this prompt. Then I was left with one final consideration. To me, very broadly, there are two types of enjoyment of old things. You can enjoy old things because they give you a glimpse into something that no longer exists, either a world or a way of doing things, a way of making movies, a way of making comics. It's a snapshot of time trapped in amber, but for many other people, that kind of work might seem fossilized, something that we can appreciate as part of our history, but we're not able to relate to. The second way of appreciating something old might be to see in it a kind of modernity and a certain kind of contemporary style that you're shocked to see existed some time ago. These kind of old works might be things that were trailblazers or were ahead of their time and not appreciated until much later. And I have to say that for the longest time, I had a bias against really old comics. They seemed to be completely disconnected from the world we live in. They seemed primitive and not sophisticated. But I don't think I knew what I was talking about, because once I started getting into it, I found the favorites just piling up. And one specific area that I discovered much later in life, but have grown to have a great fondness for, are old newspaper comics, particularly old American newspaper comics. Winsor McCay's Little Nemo and Frank King's Gasoline Alley are just two of the many comics that I've started appreciating more in my later years as a comics reader. But there is one old newspaper comic that I can truly say that has captured my love. This comic seems both classic and contemporary at the same time. I love the characters and the world they live in, and most of all, I'm still to completely unlock what makes this comic so appealing. Of course, I'm talking about George Herriman's Crazy Cat, represented here in this wonderful Sunday Press edition. This newspaper comic is more than 100 years old now, and every time I read it, I feel that I've been transported back in time, but I also think that I'm looking at something quite contemporary, something so modern in its absurdity and its meta-narratives that I think it would fit right into indie zines today. Crazy Cat has some of the most simple premises and some of the most repeated premises I have ever encountered in any medium, let alone comics. And the fact that the same characters, same relationships, same interactions never gets old is quite honestly one of the most incredible narratives narrative achievements I've ever encountered. I know what kind of cartoons and comics have followed in the decades after Crazy Cat, and the fact that this comic is more mature, is more stylish, is more linguistically dexterous and more artistically ambitious than what came after it makes it an aberration almost like no other. Whenever I think about old comics, no matter how highly I think of them, comics like Little Nemo and Prince Valiant that I think are absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking, I still have some reservations about some parts of them. But the leanness, the absurdity, and the absolute playfulness of Crazy Cat makes it that rare historical artifact that isn't necessarily easy to read or pre-digested, but remains such a unique experience. It's one of the only comics I know, alongside Walt Kelly's Pogo, that makes me read it aloud, to listen to the words being said by the characters. It's a comic that almost forces me to enact it as a radio play when reading it. These are effects that are still unique and still easy to appreciate as masterpieces of comics even today. Now it's your turn. What are your thoughts on old comics, and what's an old comic that you love? This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.